Hey buddy, watch this.
Hello, Regis Kilbin is the name, and Hearthstone is the game, and these are the 5 cards that were brought back to life with Journey to Un'Goro. Now, there's no doubt that the Un'Goro expansion has completely revolutionized the meta, but that's not just because of all the new cards. In fact, there are some old cards that never really ever saw play or haven't seen play in years that have sort of been reactivated, brought back to life because of the new Un'Goro cards that have enabled them. So the meta has changed in a lot of ways, and maybe most surprising of all is that some cards that were previously considered rather terrible, almost unplayable, have suddenly found new homes in competitive decks, which is both a great sign for the design of Un'Goro as an expansion, but it's also great for people who play on a budget and might have to find uses for cards that they've always had but have never really been able to play. So ultimately, I think it's a fantastic development as far as Hearthstone is concerned, and I want to give these cards the recognition that they deserve. All that said, let's go ahead and jump into the list. Up first is a card I think a lot of people had practically forgotten about, despite the fact that it is a classic set legendary. This is the Black Knight. Now, I don't know that this one is going to stick around necessarily, and frankly, it's probably already starting to fall out of favor in the new Un'Goro meta, but for a little while there, with the rise and prominence of Taunt Warrior, the Black Knight was suddenly a relevant tech choice in mid-range and control-style decks once again, which it essentially hasn't been, as far as I can remember, for 2 years or more. And that's really cool when small tech cards like this that occasionally just give you the perfect answer for a meta that's developing. I think that shows that it's a healthy card that's good for the game, even if you don't think about it every single day, if it's not run in every deck ever. The fact that it exists and it's there provides some really nice balance. So I was happy to see the Black Knight make a return, even if it was a pretty brief one. Up next is the Murloc Tidehunter. This is a basic set minion. It's totally free. Everybody gets it. It's not something you'd traditionally call a strong minion. It's certainly not something that's been run a lot historically, except maybe way back in the day when Murloc decks were actually a thing, very near to the start of Hearthstone, even in the beta, really. But up to that point, Murloc Tidehunter's never really been run because there's never been that prominent of a Murloc deck. But suddenly with Un'Goro, there's a couple different ways to play Murlocs. There's both Murloc Shaman via the quest, but even more prominently now is the Murloc Aggro Paladin style of play, which is actually a pretty strong deck that's picking up a lot of steam, and suddenly Murloc Tidehunter is a fundamental card in both of those decks simply because it's one of the Murlocs available, and frankly it's one of the better Murlocs available because it does summon 2 Murlocs with a single card, and despite the fact that they're pretty weak as far as their bodies are concerned, they just synergize so well with all the other Murloc buffs and Murloc auras and all the various ways that you benefit from having multiple Murlocs on the board, that Murloc Tidehunter has actually become a pretty fundamentally valuable piece to those decks, and it's a card you see rather often in the meta, which I never thought would be a thing, but once again, it's a pretty fantastic addition to the game. Moving on to my number 3 card, it's the Youthful Brewmaster, another classic set minion that has really hardly ever been played. Very occasionally this kind of card would pop up as a very niche answer to a specific need in really gimmicky style decks, maybe discounting it with N'Zoth and summoning a second N'Zoth, or using it in a mill rogue style of play. But it's never been a part of the competitive meta at the highest level, at least that I can remember. But suddenly, thanks to Quest Rogue and its wide usage on the ladder, Youthful Brewmaster is practically everywhere, and it's a fundamental piece of that deck, which is cool. I love that this card, which has a nice little battle cry that you don't often think about as being consistent, suddenly found a home where it gets to shine. And once again, that's awesome that this card was able to be brought back to life just because of one new card added to the game. Moving on to the number 4 spot, it's the Hunter minion, Tundra Rhino. This is a card that did get played quite a bit in the past, but frankly, Hunter just hasn't been relevant in quite a while. And even when it was relevant the last time, this was not a card that typically made the cut in lists. But suddenly Tundra Rhino works in a couple different environments. Everybody thought it was going to be popular in Un'Goro with a big combo with the Hunter quest and getting a lot of cheap dudes out and giving them all charge in a single turn and killing your opponent, but that's not really been the case. Tundra Rhino has just become a solid value minion in a mid-range hunter list that has, frankly, a lot of death rattle minions that benefit from Tundra Rhino, but also it's just a minion that tends to stick around these days, and you can get charging Savannah High mains and all kinds of other benefits from Tundra Rhino. So another basic set card, totally free to everybody, that is now a popular piece of one of the best and most popular decks on the ladder. And then for my final card, it's the one I absolutely never thought would see play. It's Stone Tusk Boar. The 1-mana 1/1 charging beast. Whoever thought this card could be good, and yet somehow, thanks to Quest Rogue, suddenly this thing is a force to be reckoned with. It's often not actually a 1/1, but instead a 5/5 after the Quest Rogue has activated their quest, making it a very scary 1-mana play that can do a ton of damage, make super efficient trades, is often Shadow Stepped or Youthful Brewmastered back into the hand, and sends 5 to your face once again, making it a pretty interesting combo finisher in that particular deck. So this card is good. Who could have ever imagined that Journey to Un'Goro would bring back not only the other 4 cards in this list, a handful of others that I didn't even mention, but Stone Tusk Boar. I just can't believe it, but I have to admit, Blizzard went above and beyond with Un'Goro as far as restoring some life to these old cards, and I think Stone Tusk Boar is the ultimate example of that fact. And there you have it. That's my list of the 5 cards that Journey to Un'Goro brought back to life. The list could have been longer, frankly. I had like 8 or 9 cards, but I just wanted to focus on a few specific ones and the kinds of decks that have brought them back to life. Frankly, Quest Rogue as a deck has revived so many different cards, it could practically be its own list, but there were some others that needed recognition as well. So ultimately, I'm curious what you guys have to say. What cards do you think it's interesting that were brought back to life in this expansion? What cards would you like to see return to life in a future expansion? And how could Blizzard design new cards that actually restore some of the life and the potential in these old cards as well? So all that said, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, game on.